this helped you. So let's jump right in. All right. So the starting point. So why does IDS matter? If we really step back, most companies I say are playing whack-a-mole, right? Like this is real. Most companies when they go into leadership team meetings, these meetings are updates, right? Like I always got the frustrated clients, and I had this too when I was running my own business, where I would sit through a meeting and it was an hour, and I got to the end of the hour and I was like, why am I here? Like that could have just been an email, or we're talking about the same issues quarter over quarter over quarter, and just playing whack-a-mole. And the reality is, your competitors are doing this, right? They are not structured, they're not organized, they're stuck solving the same issues. So when we think about IDSing is a competitive advantage. Do we have a leadership team that actually talks about important issues and is willing to get to the root of them, while our competitors are stuck at the surface level of the same issues? As that compounds over time, that puts people at a much better competitive advantage on a leadership that is willing to address real issues than as a leadership team that's sputtering for quarters and years because they just aren't good at solving problems. So when most companies are stuck playing whack-a-mole, it's really three things that I've seen, and I've seen this consistently with my clients in the beginning of the EOS journey. The first is we're not prioritizing the right issues. We're talking about either surface level things, or we're talking about things that are easy and quick, right? I see it all the time in an IDS. Let's go after this because it's easier, because it's quick. And then the meeting runs out and we didn't talk about anything important. So a lot of companies playing whack-a-mole, it's because we're not prioritizing the right issues. Number two is we're solving symptoms. So it does actually feel like we are making progress in meetings, but we're not getting to the root of issues. And so when we solve a symptom, it's going to pop up another quarter from now, or a month from now, or a week from now. So getting deeper is what people need to do. Get deeper so that you get to a root, so that, again, we're not playing whack-a-mole. We're getting to the root of the issues and knocking them down forever. The third is issues aren't discussed as a leadership team. So this is just about being open and honest. This requires each member of the leadership team to take a leap of faith and really get what's in here out onto the table. If you aren't being an open and honest, that issue will blow up eventually. It's just when. So it's better for us to get things out on the table and solve those things now. Now, if you're playing a game of whack-a-mole, what tends to happen over time is we lose momentum, right? So maybe you had a couple of good quarters, and then all of a sudden you start to get stuck on the same issue, and it starts to really lose steam in the leadership team. You start to get frustrated. We start to feel like we're not having progress. And again, because of that, we start to lose faith as a leadership team. And when we lose faith, it also causes us to lose interest. It starts to cause us to go into these leadership team meetings with just another meeting, right? That is bad. Every member of the leadership team, this is critical. Every member of the leadership team should stick up for the integrity of the meeting. Because again, if we are playing whack-a-mole, if we're not getting to the root of the issues, if we're not being open and honest, it's going to cause the whole entire team to lose momentum, faith, and interest. And that is a big problem for a leadership team. So that's why it's important, again, why IDS matters is because when we're strong at it, we really start to gain traction. We start to gain momentum. We start to gain more faith, and we start to gain more interest in showing up in these meetings. And it all starts with how well are we IDSing? That really determines, is this a good meeting or not? So the purpose of IDS, right? There's really two purposes. Number one is, as you are operating your business, it is natural that you're going to run into issues, right? We're going to run into, priority issues. We're going to run into people issues, to customer issues. That is normal. There's a quote that I loved that, a lot of people think that as you grow and you get better people, issues are going to go away, right? Because we're going to hire more talented people. And when you come from that mindset, you're missing the point. The best quote that I've ever heard is, business is issues, right? That is the game of business, is issues, managing through them, prioritizing the most important ones, and knocking it down. Like if you become the best leadership team at that, you can become the best company in your industry, because business is issues. So IDS is a mechanism to help us manage through those issues, to get better at managing those issues. If we can get good at that, we're going to get great at business. You're going to become a great leader as well. So the two purposes are, number one, we are prioritizing the most important issues every week. That's the starting point of IDS, right? We're not talking about immaterial things. We've learned how to prioritize what ultimately matters. And the second is, we learn how to get to the root of them, right? We learn how to not only get to the root, but knock that issue down forever. And when you can distill that discipline throughout the organization, you go from an organization that has bottlenecks, right? That has to have, a CEO or a founder or a leadership team member solving everything, to an organization that has taught the discipline of problem solving throughout the organization. That kills bottlenecks, that creates compound interest. And again, for you guys as leaders, makes it more fun and interesting to manage when, again, you don't have to solve every problem. So that's what we're trying to do here in IDS. And again, why this tool matters so much. I think it gets slept on a lot because it's IDS, it sounds simple. So people sleep on it. It truly is one of the most important tools to, again, create delegation, create problem solvers, and release pressure on a leadership team. So let's roll in. So I love this quote from Miles Davis. It goes, "Time isn't the main thing; it's the only thing." And again, this relates to IDS because if you're not prioritizing the most important issues, then you're wasting your time, right? You're showing up to meetings and you're literally wasting your time. Why are we here? Why are we not talking about important things? And then if you're not getting to root of issues, you're again wasting your time quarter after quarter. I've had years as when I was running my business, I've had multiple years when I looked back and I said, I did a lot, but I really did nothing. And I think the root of that issue was, again, I just wasn't really open and honest or willing to kind of have the hard conversations to break through some of the ceilings that I was at. So when we think about IDS is a mechanism for us to save time and get more efficient about with our time. So the big picture, when we think about EOS and the issues list, there are two places that we have an issues list. So it's important you understand these mechanisms, why they exist, and how they're different. So the first place is on our vision traction organizer. So these are the long-term issues. So this is important because you're going to face issues as you're growing your business. And it's important to know, where do we compartmentalize these? So a long-term issue, what goes on our vision traction organizer, these are issues that are popping up. It could be popping up in your L10s. It could be popping up in our quarterlies. It could be popping up in your day-to-day, where we've identified a big issue, but we know it's not going to happen this quarter. So we know it's standing in the way of our business, right? So maybe there's an industry change that is happening that is on the horizon, right? I see a lot of this with my clients with AI. They know it's going to be an important thing in their business, but they also know they're not going to let it take away from their rocks this quarter. That's a long-term issue. Anything that we've extracted that we know is important, but it's something that, again, is not urgent, we're going to park that on the long-term issues list. This matters because if everything is an issue, a short-term issue, then you're going to get distracted. It's going to pull you away from what matters. So what I urge you guys to think about, that long-term issues list, that VTO issues list, matters because this is a place to compartmentalize things that we're picking up, but that we know we're deprioritizing this quarter and coming back to in the future. We don't lose these issues, right? It's important to note, for anybody that's been through a quarterly at this point, you know that we look at the long-term issues list as we consider rocks in the future. So we don't lose this stuff. Some people think, oh, we put it on the long-term issues list and we lose it. We don't. We always revisit that every time we go into a quarterly to say, is this now the quarter that we're going to address this? So it's important to know that VTO issues list, we're compartmentalizing things that we see, but that we know we're not going to allow to take away from our focus this quarter. Now, the short-term issues list, this is our L10 issues list, right? This is the thing that we are working on every single week. So these types of issues are things that have to be addressed, or at least have to be discussed within the quarter. These are things that we'll talk about kind of what makes up a great short-term issues list. But these are things that are in your day-to-day, right? Your rocks being off track, your scorecard being off track, maybe a major employee or customer issue that's popped up, maybe something you and your department are really struggling with and you need some help on the leadership team. These are things that are more pressing, something inside 90 days that we want to discuss. So it's just important to call out, these are the two mechanisms of issues lists when we want to build a strong issues list. Knowing the difference between what's something that we're not going to focus on this quarter and knowing what is something that we do need to talk about this quarter is important for you guys to gain focus. So that's the issues list. That's the big picture. Now, once we have our issues list, we want to really distill down and get the discipline of knocking these issues down at the root forever, which we'll go through in a second here. So some more kind of points around the big picture. So the first thing is we want to build a culture around openness and honesty. When I see teams getting stuck in the mud, it's generally because they're not willing to address the issues that actually exist, right? You know, when I was running my business, at the end, and the reason why I ultimately left was because we had a change in the industry that caused us to be kind of over our skis. Right, we had a lot of people on staff. We started to lose some money. There was some, our customers were going bankrupt because they were VC backed, and yet we would go into meetings over and over and over and over again and not actually talk about the elephant in the room. And when you do that, again, you start to lose faith that we can actually solve things. You start to lose interest. And if it goes unsaid, it's eventually building steam. Like your head, if you can think of your head as a thermometer, starts to get hot, starts to get red, it starts to get red, it starts to get red after every L10, and we haven't said what's on our mind, and it blows up. We don't want that, right? If we can get these things out, we can actually solve them. We have incredibly smart people in our business. And I think sometimes we underestimate that. So you want to build a culture around openness and honesty. That's what the issues list is. You're building that discipline, that muscle memory for people to get things out there and into the open. So we want to do that at the leadership team level, but you also want to teach that discipline down the chain in your organization. The issues list is about building a culture of openness and honesty. Get it out of your head and just get it to paper. That's step one. Now, we also want to build that issue solving discipline throughout our organization. So again, I don't want you guys being the only people in your business that can solve problems. I want us to be able to kill bottlenecks and teach that discipline so that before your direct report comes to you and says, hey, I need help with this, they've IDS'd it. They've gone through with their team, hey, how do we fix this, right? What's the root of this issue? And if you can do that beneath your level, 90% of those issues are going to get solved without your input. So it's going to encourage that delegation. You're going to build leaders and managers who can solve things on their own. So this is the magic of IDS. When we not only get it at the leadership team level, but we start to build L10s down the chain and teach this discipline. That's how, again, we can kill bottlenecks, really encourage delegation and build leaders. Lastly, and I know I've said this two or three times, so I won't stew on it, but this is really true. IDSing is a competitive advantage. I don't know, I'm sure you guys have worked for other organizations. I would say in 95% of companies that I've seen in my time as a coach, either or prior in running my business, we had about 200 customers. I would say 95% of them had no discipline around talking about important things or getting to the root of issues. And that means for the 5% that do have that discipline, you are growing much faster and going at getting to the root of things. And you're not talking about drama. You're not talking about politics while these other companies are. So that is a huge competitive advantage. So the mechanics of an IDS. So again, we're going to start to go into how this works and then some tools to get you a little bit sharper on this. So again, just at a high level, stepping back, when we think about IDS, there are three components of IDS, right? The first is identify, the second is discuss, and the third is solve. Now, before we get into what those are, you want to, again, and this is critical, if this isn't happening, you have to call this out. Everybody that is on the line or watching this, you have to call this out before you ever jump into an issues list. Somebody, and usually it's the person running the meeting, needs to say, what are the top 3 issues on the list? Do not jump into number 1. Do not jump into the one that's, hey, this is easy or quick, so let's solve it. Stop. Record scratch, right? I need all of you guys to police this. What are the top 3 most important issues on this list? Take this seriously. Because again, if you go through a meeting and you aren't talking about urgent things, you're going to end that meeting frustrated. So what are the top 3 issues? You'll look at your list. You're going to prioritize the top 3, and then we're going to jump into IDS. So again, I know these are basics. You guys probably know this by now. But if anyone is running meetings and they're seeing somebody start with number 1 without asking what are the top 3, or picking easy or quick things, record scratch, stop it, call it out, bring back to what are the top 3 issues on this list. Then we're going to jump into IDS. So identify means what is the root of this issue? You should ask why 5 times. Once we get to the root, right? We don't want to solve symptoms. What's the root of this issue? It's generally going to root back to the 6 key components. Is it a vision issue? Is it a people issue? Is it a numbers issue? Is it a process issue? Is it an issues issue, right? Are we not getting to the root of things? Is it a traction issue, right? We have the wrong rocks. Get to the root. Second is discuss, which means what are the potential solutions that each of us have in mind, opportunities, things that we can do to progress this issue. And then solve is flipping the switch to mean, what are we actually going to do about this? So is it a decision that needs to be made? Is it a to-do that goes into place? Is it maybe we realized we do have the solve, but it's a long-term issue now. Like we know what the solve is, but it goes on the long-term issues list. But what are we going to do about this? That's what the solve is. So I know you guys kind of know this stuff at this point. It's just a quick refresher. So let's get into some tips. So tip number one, I cannot emphasize this enough. Create a great issues list, right? You cannot you can't have a great IDS session if you have a weak issues list. So tip number one is to create a great issues list. So issues are a couple of things. The first is scorecard. So as you're going through your scorecard, every red item is mission critical. So if you have a red scorecard, you need to be dropping that down to the issues list because we want to build tension there. We want to know what's going on. A lot of the times the scorecard prompts a deeper discussion. So if our revenue numbers are off track, we want that to drop to the issues list because when we IDS it, it's going to point us to a really big root issue, right? Is there an HR issue? Is there a scorecard issue? Maybe we're measuring the wrong measurables, right? It's not always what do we have to do to get this green. Sometimes it's pointing to a deeper issue in people or in the scorecard that maybe we're measuring the wrong thing. So any red scorecard item has to go on your issues list. Same thing for rocks. Every off track rock is mission critical. Remember, we said these are the most important things in the quarter. So what I want to call out is it doesn't mean that the rock has to be off track for you to call it out as being off track. If you have any whiff that it could go off track, or if you see a trend that it's starting to trend off track, make it off track, right? Add it to your issues list because this gives you an opportunity to IDS it. Your to-dos that are not getting done. I could say, work with 11 companies. I have probably seen in all 11 that their to-dos are not, 90% of them are not getting knocked down every week, right? That's a discipline that is learned over time. If you see to-dos that are continuously popping up as not getting done every single L10, you need to stop letting that be normal and you need to start making that an issue. So rather than it being on the on the to-do list 3 weeks in a row, someone needs to say, make this an issue. Right click it, make it an issue. We need to talk about it because there's an accountability issue going on there. So that's also an issue. I rarely see this happening. So hopefully you guys take away from this. If your to-dos aren't getting done, add it to the issues list. The fourth thing is, and I want you to think about it, I would say issue 4 and 5. So issues being raised, serious items that need to be fixed, and being honest. I've had a couple of clients where they say, Dan, we don't necessarily have a ton of issues in the business. And that is extremely rare. That to me is pointing to maybe people not being honest. Because there is always, when I ask that person one-on-one, when I say, so you're telling me there isn't something that you sit on the end of your bed at night that is a problem, that's really bothering you, right? That's living in your head rent-free. There really isn't anything in your head right now like that. And they say, you know what, Dan? No, there is. Like I have a bunch of things that's in my head. It's because you're not being honest, right? So what I would ask you is if you can't think of issues, I would ask you to think before an IDS session. What is the 1 or 2 things that after work, right after I close my laptop, that is really bothering me, right? That is living in my head, that when I sit on the end of my bed at night before I go to bed, it's kind of dominating my headspace. Add that thing to your issues list. Have the courage to do it. Usually those are the most sensitive things, and those are generally the issues that hold us back the most. So it really building a great issues list, the burden is on every leader or every manager or every person sitting in L10 to be open and honest about what they're facing. So don't let your issues list be weak, right? Be open and honest. What are the top 3 issues that we should be talking about? And if we're having boring meetings, it's prompting that we're not building a great issues list. So build a great issues list. That's step number 1. As we talked about scorecards, do not get used to red, right? The way that you don't get used to red is by IDSing a red scorecard. So what happens is when leadership teams run L10s, they go through 4 to 8 L10s and their numbers are red. And then what happens is it's like a dripping faucet, right? You hear it for the first couple of weeks and then you stop hearing it. And all of a sudden somebody walks into your house. They're like, do you hear that? Like, why haven't you fixed that yet? That's what happens to businesses, right? When you have a red scorecard and you stop IDSing it, you stop putting urgency to it, you lose the whole point of the scorecard because the scorecard is to create tension. It's to create urgency. It's to create action. So that's why it's so important for a scorecard to get called out and added to the issues list when you see red, because the point is to drive action. What are we doing to make this scorecard green? Or do we have the wrong goal? Or are we measuring the wrong things? You only start to get a green scorecard by IDSing. So remember, at the end of the day, if our numbers are on track and our rocks are on track, the business is going to fly. Your L10 is the mechanism to keep your numbers on track and to keep your rocks on track, but we only do that by IDSing them. So please, if you guys are seeing red scorecards, call them out immediately. You have to have a sense of urgency on your rocks and scorecard. And your L10s is the mechanism to create that urgency by IDSing when something is off track. The IDS gets it back on track. The I and the D should be, what are we going to do in the next 7 days to propel this forward? Whether it's actions to get the scorecard green, whether it's, hey, maybe we have the wrong goal and it's time to actually talk about that, or maybe we're measuring the wrong things. We should IDS that, right? So use the L10 as a mechanism to get those things green. So the second tip that I want to share is you really need to engage issue solving as separate steps. And I want you to start thinking about this way. Again, I see very teams doing this. And this requires each member of the leadership team to be very aware in an IDS session. So I, D, and S are very separate stages in the way that you think, in the way that you move through an issue. And you need to think about it that way. So I like to say when you're going through an IDS session, you want to really be aware of what hat you are wearing. So the issue hat, right? The issue solving hat, this requires a very different frame of thinking. Now, when we think about this, the I is, what is the root of the issue? Often when you discuss an issue on the issues list, it's going to be something surface level. It's going to be symptomatic. I would say 95% of the time, the actual root issue will not be obvious. And so again, what most leadership teams do is they'll read the issue and then everyone around the room, they just go to D. They don't even think about I, right? They just go to, oh, here's how I think we could fix this. And they do fix it, right? They do something that fixes it, but then it pops up a quarter later or a month later. And it's like, what the hell's going on, right? Because we didn't actually do I. So when you start an issue, I want you to think you're wearing an I hat. You're wearing a hat with the letter I on it. This requires each member of the leadership team to actually say and be aggressive with this. Guys, you're wearing a D hat. Get out of D. Let's go back to I. What is the root issue here? Ask why 5 times. Be curious. So, okay, so yeah, our sales are down. Why? What's going on here? What is the root of this issue? And when you start to take control of that and really wear the I hat, then you're going to start to realize the conversation is going to get much deeper. You're going to start peeling onions back. Oh, you know what? Maybe is it a people issue, right? Maybe do we have the wrong person in that seat? Or maybe we need a seat that we don't even have at this point. So let's pull up our A chart, right? So you got to be curious. You have to ask why 5 times. And I want you to really ask, what is the root 5 times before you start even getting into D? So my advice to you is, if you realize that we just jumped to D, think about it to all of a sudden the leadership team is wearing a D hat. Tell them, hey, we're wearing the D hat. We're not at the root. Let's take that hat off, because D is a completely different frame of mind. D is all about, all right, now what are the solutions or opportunities in place? That's a different way of thinking. When you wear the I hat, you want to be curious. You want to ask why. You want to be pushing what is the root of the issue. So when you're in I, be intentional about it, right? Know that you are in the I phase. Frame that up. We are in I, guys. We're trying to get to the root of things. When you're at the root, then you're going to flip your frame of mind. All right, now we're at the root. Okay, this is what's going on. D should then be quick, right? D should be very fast. When you actually know what the real issue is, D becomes obvious. Like what we have to do about this, you should then go around the room and say, all right, if the root issue is we have a, structural issue and we need to assess our accountability chart, D's pretty obvious at that point, right? It's okay, if we have an ops issue, the ops leader, hey, what you're going to do about this, or what we think that we can do about this is, hey, why don't we do a people analyzer exercise in the next 7 days? Or why don't we do an assessment of our accountability chart and bring back a couple of options on what seats we might be missing or what adjustments we need to make? It becomes very obvious what the discuss is, right? So discuss is really around, when we know the root, we're being intentional about what are things that we can do to kind of make progress on this route. It's a different frame of thinking. So I want you to then be intentional on, okay, now we're wearing the D hat. If you've done your work on I, the D should be quick, right? I should probably be, if we talk about a 10-minute issue, I should be 7 minutes, D should be 2 minutes, and S should be 30 seconds to 60 seconds. So I and D is really about learning, right? We're learning what the real problem is, and then we're learning what potential solutions are. Now, S, I really want you to flip a switch on this one, right? So when we talk about issues, I and D is learning, S is all about forwarding action. And so when we put the S hat on, so we know the solutions when things are getting repetitive in your discuss, right? So one person is like, they've said their solution 5 times. That's how you know we're done with D. All right, we're politicking now. We got it. We heard it. Then you need to move to S. I want you to flip a switch. Now, what are we going to do about this? So S is generally a decision. So a decision needs to be made. And if you can't get to consensus, I need the integrator to make the call, right? Or most of the time, it's a to do, right? So what are we doing in the next 7 days to take progress on this? So when we talk about knocking issues down at the root forever, it's all about S. The forever moment is all about S. What are we doing to knock this down? So S requires the leadership team to think about action, to think about forwarding action in the business. And this really matters if you want to knock issues down, you get good at S. So S is going to be that discipline of, okay, and this generally requires somebody who is, in every leadership team, there's always some person who's obsessed about next steps. That's generally, I love to tell that person, be the police on this. Do we have good solves in place? Do we have good to-dos coming out of this? Be intentional about what are we doing in the next 7 days to forward action on this. So what I want to leave you with on this tip is next time you go into an IDS session, be intentional about what stage you're in. Often what I'll tell leadership teams is if you're in D and you feel like you haven't gotten to I, call it out. Just say, guys, we're in D and we haven't even discussed I yet, right? Let's move back into the I phase. In the I phase, let's talk about why. Let's talk about why is this an issue? What's the root of the issue? What's underneath the issue? Be intentional about what phase you're in and recognize that the best issue solving sessions are when we're spending a majority of the time in I. And if we're not, call your team out. Let's pull us back there. This takes practice, but think in your next IDS, what phase are we in? And did we spend enough time in the I phase to really understand what the problem ultimately is? All right, so let's keep rolling here. This quote actually really points to why I matters. It's from Albert Einstein. He goes, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solutions. This goes back to I, right? A lot of the times we're solving things that aren't actually even real problems. We're solving symptoms because we don't know what the problem actually even is. So I is incredibly important in understanding what's the root of this thing. Are we actually solving the right issue? Are we solving something that's symptomatic of the issue? So really think about this quote from Albert Einstein, because again, the actual solves that we put in place are really obvious when we understand the root of the issue. All right, so some tips to be relentless on I. So a couple of things, and this again requires courage from each member of the leadership team. So what we want to do is when you go into an IDS session, there's always one owner of that issue. So it's generally the little bubble in 90. If you're using 90, you see a little face. That person owns the issue. So that person's going to frame what the issue is. And what happens a lot of the time is we'll see that person monologue. Like they'll go on for 5 minutes on what the issue is, and they're jumping, ping-ponging all over the place. When we go into I, a little tip for you guys, I want the person who's framing the issue, I want you to say it in one sentence with no commas. And that this is a great practice because it really requires a leadership team member to think before they speak, to really think what is the issue that I'm putting up here. So you should be able to say the issue in one sentence with no commas. The real issue, so think about it. The real issue that I'm solving today is blank in one sentence. That requires you to go through that thought process of getting through the BS, getting through the story, and saying, what is the issue? So again, if somebody is framing up an issue, I want you to call them out if they've gone on for a minute or 2 minutes. John, what is the issue, right? What is the issue we're trying to solve in a sentence, right? We're monologuing here, right? What is the issue in one sentence? Don't let it go. If you feel like the person isn't clear about what their issue is, push back on it. Frame it in one sentence for me. So a lot of the times, again, what's a helpful way to practice this is when somebody is running the IDS session, if you're in person and have a whiteboard, grab the whiteboard, whoever's running the meeting, and again, say what's the issue in a sentence and don't let it go until you can write it on the screen in one sentence. If you're doing it virtually, grab a Google Doc, grab a Word doc, grab an Excel, and whoever's running the meeting, say, okay, John, frame the issue for me and don't let it go until you can write it on the screen in one sentence. This discipline requires you to get to I much faster because it requires a leadership team member to be more thoughtful about what the issue they are even solving in the first place. So be relentless on it. Push back on your teammates. If you can get good at really identifying I, it's going to allow for much better D and S. Tip number 4, prevent excessive discussions. We as leadership team members, actually all humans love to talk, right? We love to talk about what's going on in our world. We love to talk about the stories and why this is going on, what's happening in the background. But it wastes time, right? I'd say 90% of information is irrelevant to actually getting to a solve. So you really want to kind of cut off speeches if you can. A really good meaty issue shouldn't take longer than 10 minutes. If it's taking longer than 10 minutes, we're talking too much. So, I've got Dan here, right? Some ways to, cut people off is, Dan, we understand your point, right? You're monologuing. Let's come back to it. Dan, I'm sorry, we need to get to this a little bit faster. Or you're discussing, but what's the real issue we're trying to solve here? Can you say it in a sentence? Dan, I need to cut you off, right? We're going in too deep here, right? What is the root issue, right? What are we trying to solve here? If you really start to hear people repeating themselves, it's politicking, right? We want to maintain a spirit of impatience on the discuss portion of the of the IDS, right? So you don't want to be discussing 1,000 options forever, get to the end of the meeting and you haven't solved anything. So the main tip here is maintain a spirit of impatience, of urgency in your IDS session. When you get to the root of the issue, again, you could spend the whole time just discussing what solutions are. You really want to maintain impatience. You really want to have that sense of urgency. And when you hear people not being clear about what their opportunities are, or when they're monologuing on what they think that they can do to solve this, you got to cut them off, right? And that requires discipline because it's not fun. And sometimes it's pretty uncomfortable to cut people off. But if you want to really get to the root of issues and solve 5 or 6 big issues in every meeting, it requires the leadership team members to maintain that impatience and sense of urgency as you're discussing opportunities. So just get comfortable starting to cut people off, right? For anyone who's been in sessions, we have the squirrel, right? You're squirreling, you have a tangent alert, or, I love Elmo, so go get an Elmo doll, which is enough. Let's move on, throw it at the person, but learn how to cut people off in a respectful way that gets us to kind of move through the D portion faster. Now, again, when I talked about wearing different hats, tip number 5 is to be clear in the transition. So once you've gotten through D and you've maintained that sense of urgency, that sense of impatience, that, all right, we're beating a dead horse here. What is the solve, right? What are the opportunities? Then be clear on the transition. So this is going to require, if it's not, I want it to be the integrator, but if it's not, it should be anybody on the leadership team to say, all right, let's move to solve. Make it a clear transition. So wear the hat. Let's go to solve. What are we going to do about this? What is the solution? When you make it a clear transition, it really starts to change people's mindsets to what are the opportunities to, all right, what are the things we're going to do about this? So 90% of the time, a solve is a to-do. It's a 7-day action item. What are we going to do in the next 7 days, and who is going to own that? So just be clear, right? When we're in D and we've got all the solutions out there, we've had that impatience, right? Again, if you're solving a 10-minute issue, you've spent 6 to 7 minutes on the I, 3 minutes, it should be easy, right? You go around the room, like, what can we do about this? Should be 30 seconds to a minute per person tops. And then S should be, we have all the opportunities out there. Now let's move to a forwarding action frame. What's the to-do or what's the decision? Be clear about that transition. And then wrap the meeting up with the to-dos. So when you're going into your conclude, we should be reading all the to-dos because this is that extra, that extra push on accountability to here's who's doing what and the person is committing to it. All right. So just a note, because I see sometimes my clients will get hung up on this. Sometimes we'll put a solve in place and we don't know if it's really going to solve the problem. Right. So we think, for example, with a people issue. We think sometimes that hiring a physician is going to solve the issue. So the to do will be, all right, we're going to go out there and create a job description, but that's not actually solving the real problem, right? The problem is a people issue. We need to get somebody in a seat, even though the to do is just a 7-day action item. So people are like, should we actually leave the issue on the list because we're not solving it with the job description? You don't want to do that, right? You want to eliminate the issue when we're starting to gain momentum on it, because you don't want to be stewing on issues over and over and over again, the same issues. You solve an issue with it to do, and if the issue is still an issue in the next IDS or a couple of weeks later, just add it back to your issues list. But you don't want to be like stewing on issues for weeks and months and months. Get your solve in place and mark the issue as solved. And then if it continues to be an issue, re-add it to your issues list. One of the biggest hangups I see when we're solving complex issues is a lot of the times there will be multiple issues in a bigger issue. And so this is where I see my clients squirrel a ton. So you want to be first, again, relentless on what is the problem we're solving in a sentence. So we get to the root, right? What is the big issue we're solving here? Let's make it clear. And sometimes when we make it clear, we'll realize there are multiple issues embedded in this same issue. And what you want to do is you want to solve one at a time. So if you've got into an issue when we've realized, oh, there's 2 or 3 issues attached to this complex issue, take issue 2 and 3 and add them to your issues list. Say, okay, we've identified these 2 are additional issues. Let's add them to the issues list, but don't squirrel on them. Because a lot of the times I'll see people jump down issues 2 and 3. And then the team's like, guys, what issue are we even solving? Right? We're all over the place. So when you have complex issues and you've realized that you've identified 3 issues in one big issue, break them into pieces. All right, number 2 and number 3, we're adding that to the issues list, but let's stay on number 1. So this is the issue that we're solving now. You're going to break those other 2 up, disregard them, put them on the issues list, stay on that first issue, IDS it, get to the root, knock it down, and then move on to the next one. So really avoid rabbit holes. And that does, again, it requires discipline from the leadership team to call out when we are in a rabbit hole. So when you guys are solving issues and you feel like we've identified multiple issues, be disciplined in saying, hey, there's 2 or 3 issues here. Let's add those to the issues list, but let's stay disciplined on this one. Let's get this one to the finish line. Hang up number 2 is the fearless leader is looking for consensus. So we call the fearless leader the integrator because, again, oftentimes, I would say 8 out of 10 IDS sessions, it should be pretty easy to get to consensus. Like if you've really done your homework, you've gotten to the root, you've discussed, and you've gotten to a solve, a lot of the times it's pretty clear and it's pretty consensus what the decision's going to be made. But I would say 2 out of 10 times, 2 out of 10 issues, we're hung up, right? And the fearless leader is looking for consensus where it's not possible to gain consensus. So we really want to see when we're beating a dead horse, right? We've gotten to 15, 20 minutes on an issue. The integrator has to step in, right? So if you're an integrator watching this, it's your job to step in and be the buck stops here, the tiebreaker to move an issue to resolution. So if you're not an integrator, no, the integrator is not trying to be a jerk by making a decision that doesn't jive with what you want to do. It is their job at the end of the day, if we're hung up, to make the call and to move the business forward. It's better to make a decision, even that you don't agree with, than to get hung up on an issue and let it stay on our list forever. So again, if you are an integrator and we have to make a decision, stop looking for consensus. If we're stuck, be the person that takes the decision and moves forward. So I think this is the last slide. Yep, it is. And just one sec, let me jump back. So how do we know if we're IDSing well? So you guys can turn this into a checklist. It might be helpful for you. We know if we're running good IDS sessions when our scorecard is mostly green. So this is kind of counterintuitive. But if a scorecard is mostly green, it's because you're IDSing when it's red, right? It's obvious, but good IDS sessions actually drive a green scorecard, not the opposite, right? So the point of a red scorecard is to drive attention and tension to the most important numbers in your business, and then to get solves in place that make them green. So a good IDS session, your scorecard should start to be getting green. Number 2, rocks are mostly on track. So when we get to the end of a quarter, and this is the root issue of, when I go into a quarterly and we see under 80% rock completion rate, it's because we weren't running good IDS sessions. So we weren't being open and honest when something was off track, or we weren't being helpful when something was off track on getting it back on track. So a good IDS session is going to result in 100% of your rocks getting done because we're honest when something's off track and we're talking about what we need to do to get it back on track. Number 3, your L10 meetings ratings are consistently rated 9 or 10. So the reason why it's not going to be a 9 or 10 is because you didn't run a good IDS session. It's not for anyone who's run these meetings for 12 or more meetings at this point. It's not in the other parts of the meeting where you run a good meeting or not. It's in IDS. So if you guys are stuck in 7 or 8 land, it's because you're not running good IDS sessions. And it's going to take courage for each of you to be really honest about that. Say, hey, we've been at 7, and I could see it. By the way, I can see it in your 90. Every week I'll see scores. If there's 7s consistently, someone has to have the courage to say, we are not running good IDS sessions. We're not prioritizing the top issues, or we're scattered, right? We're jumping down rabbit holes, or we're not being thoughtful about moving through the IDS phase. You got to call it out. And if you do call it out, it'll allow your team to hear it and iterate in the next meeting. So you're running good IDS sessions when we start to see 9 and 10s consistently in your L10s. I would say you are clearing 6 to 10 issues. I don't want to say 8 plus. Sometimes you'll have a meeting where you have, 2 or 3 really big issues that take the whole entire meeting. That's okay. But you should be consistently, I would say, knocking down 6 to 10 issues, kind of meaty issues in an average L10 to feel like you're really kind of moving the dial, right? I would say big issues should take about 10 to 15 minutes. But you do have to be thoughtful, even in big issues, to not stew, to not, squirrel, to not tangent, to really press an issue. 10 to 15 minutes, we should be able to get through 6 to 10 big issues every single week. And then lastly, this is kind of anecdotal. When you guys start to feel like you love showing up to your L10s, that's how you know we're running good IDS sessions. It really is that simple. So my advice to anyone that feels like we're not running good IDS sessions is to take what you learned today, the tips, to start to implement them. But the way that you move action in your teams is through the rating the meeting. So if we didn't run a good meeting, by the way, we ran a meeting with the coaches yesterday, quarterly, and I rated it a 6, right? I was a 6. Everybody else was a 7, 8, or 9. I rated a 6 because for me, I need them to know that they need to get better. I need them to know why I thought I thought we were scattered. I thought that we weren't organized in how we approach things, right? And what they're going to take from that is next time we're going to get better. So if you feel like we're not as good as we can be, and we're not running these effectively, the only way to get people to move is for them to hear the feedback and to iterate. So call it out, be honest with the team, take the learnings from today and bring it into your next L10. And lastly, this takes practice, right? So as you as you continue to go through your meetings, if you're at your 12th L10, it's going to get better over the next 12 L10s. But it really does require you to be open, honest, use the tools that you have, and really rate the meeting so that people can hear the feedback and iterate in the next L10. So that's what I got for you guys today. I'm going to open it up for Q&A. So if you have any questions, drop them in the chat, drop them in the Q&A section. And we'll see if we have any questions. If not, we can wrap this up and I will send you guys the recording. So is there any questions today, guys? I'm not seeing anything pop through. So I'll give it another 10 seconds. All right, so I've got one issue here. So when you have multiple root issues, how do you know you're staying disciplined on the right one? It's as simple as pick one. Pick one. So if you have 3 issues and you started on the first issue, but the other 2, so you have a universe of now 3 issues, it's going to require each of you, whoever's owning the issue needs to say, all right, we've got 3 issues here. That's why I do like to have a whiteboard, by the way, or if you're virtual, just do it on a Google Doc. I like to be able to write the issues clearly. So here are the 3 issues. Which one are we solving? So pick the one, right? Even if you started on one and you want to move to the 3rd issue, say, all right, let's add issue number one back to the issues list and let's attack this other issue. So it just requires you to be disciplined on identifying here's the three that exist, which one are we solving, and then staying on that one and moving the other two back to the issues list, if that makes sense. Any other questions? Great. All right, guys, I will send you the recording to this. I will probably also make this a YouTube video at some point, so you can kind of send your teams the links as well. Just continue to be open and honest. Really be thoughtful about transitioning phases in your IDS sessions, and you will get better at this. But I will talk to you soon, and as always, give me a text, call, email if I can help in any way. Have a great day, guys.